Welcome to Face2Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face2Face. My next interview is with Shin. Her new film is premiering at Hot Docs this week called My Enemy, My Brother. We had a great time. We had a great chat about this film. We talked about a little bit of everything. This is a film about story. It's a film about finding a new narrative. It's about the little things. It's about incremental change and about serendipity and about, choice and freedom and responsibility. Certainly a theme that seems to be coming up with a lot of documentarians and filmmakers these days. But we talk about change and how to step into somebody else's life, if that makes any sense at all, and empathy and finding similarity through difference. And I think you're going to love this film. I think you're going to enjoy the interview. You're certainly going to fall in love with Anne, and you're going to want to see her other work. And she's actually also going to be involved in a poetry reading coming up on May the 14th at the Aga Khan Museum here in the city in Toronto. So please do stay tuned. And how serendipitous that you're even listening to this interview here, this podcast today. Don't forget davidpecklive.com for more information about my own, my writing, my more podcasts there. Of course, we're coming up on 300. And if you want to support what I do, you can do that through patreon.com. And don't forget to rabble.ca for more information about some of the other interviews I do, but also a whole lot of other material there for you to sift through. My Enemy, My Brother, coming right up with Shin. Well, welcome to Face2Face. We're joined by another very special guest today, another Hot Docs guest with us today. I think our third director here. Very excited to be talking about her new film, My Enemy, My Brother. Shin is joining us here today, direct from Toronto. Anne, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, David. It's great to be here.
So you're in the middle of it. Hot Docs has begun. Your film is screening tonight. You must be pretty excited, and you just told me the film is sold out, rush only.
Yes, rush tickets only. We're nervous. Yeah, I'm excited, and Najah and Zahed are here, which is wonderful to see them here in Toronto, and they'll be speaking and taking questions after the screening.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And having just recently seen the film, that actually gave me some goosebumps when you mentioned that. That's pretty exciting. So you're going to be sharing the stage with them and the Q&A afterwards?
Yes, definitely.
Fantastic. So why don't we talk a little bit about the film? Why don't you give us the quick snapshot of what it's about, or a rundown, whatever you like, and then I've got lots of questions for you, and then we can dive right into it.
Great. So My Enemy, My Brother is the story of two former enemies. They were soldiers in the Iran-Iraq war. Najah was Iraqi, and Zahed was an Iranian child soldier, only 13, when the Iran-Iraq war broke out. And they were on either side. And in the Battle of Khorramshahr, Zahed ended up going through, the Iranian forces were reclaiming Khorramshahr from Iraqi forces. And Najah's unit got bombed. He was injured in a bunker. Most of his colleagues had died, and the corpses were strewn around him. And Zahed was going through the bunkers and happened to find him still alive. And he went through his pockets. He saw a Quran and saw a photo of this man's young wife and baby. And when he saw this photo, he couldn't bring himself to kill him. And in that moment, he just made this decision. He said he couldn't kill him. So what he had to do instead was to try and keep him alive. He was critically injured, and he couldn't take him back to the military barracks or the hospital, because then this act which is seen as traitorous, would have been
kind of treason almost, in a way, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Would have been revealed. So he hid Najah for 3 days, brought medical supplies, and kept him alive until finally Iranian forces won the battle and a truce was declared, and then prisoners were taken. And that's the genesis of the moment of, where they met. But then their story goes on. Miraculously, 25 years later, they meet again, this time in Canada. Neither knew what happened to the other, nor whether they were alive or not. Both had been prisoners of war on either side of the war. They meet in a waiting room in Canada.
I know, it's just
crazy
insane.
chance meeting sets off a whole other series of events that ends up taking them to Iraq and Turkey. We were filming in there, in all these countries as well as Jordan, as we followed them on their journey looking for missing loved ones.
What I love about your film, and congratulations, by the way. I think it's
thank you.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, it's and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's myenemymybrothermovie.com.
That's right. That's the website.
Is the website. You'll find out some of the awards that you guys have already won, and a little bit more about the film itself. So, I mean, what I love about this film, and I think what I love about documentary, and just what I think it is, I think I love about story in particular, is this film is really not about anything in particular. It's kind of about everything that makes us human, right? Yeah. Friendship and relationship and family. I mean, there's just so many wonderful quotes in it and lines from both of these very passionate men who are clearly fighting for something else and something other. And I think it's really remarkable. And it's about human rights, and it's about peace. And so it's just, I love the interconnected nature of it all. It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, I've been filming with these guys for 4.5 years.
Okay.
And I didn't know what would happen next when Najah was searching for his wife and son. And it's true, there are these many twists and turns, and we're just following him like it's a process documentary. We're just following him every day. It's an everyday man finding himself in extraordinary situations, And at one point, he's in Iraq, and he's just come back from an orphanage where he's trying to look for records of his missing son. And he says, I really don't know what I'm doing anymore. I don't know. Am I doing what's right? Am I doing what's right or wrong? And then his sister-in-law brings a plate of oranges to him. He says, well, should I eat the orange or smoke a cigarette? And I'm kind of really, badly bumbling up the dialogue here. But it was just a Shakespearean moment, to be or not to be. It just got to that point where I really don't know if anything I do makes sense anymore. And we all find ourselves sometimes at that crossroads. And with Najah, it was in extreme relief because he was in a conflict zone in Iraq looking for a missing son and wife, and he was faced with that dilemma.
It's so ironic near the beginning of the film. Najah, is it Najah? Is that the proper
Najah.
Najah, thank you. Najah says, when talking about how young he and I guess they were, I suppose, really referring to Iraqi young men and Iranian young men and some women, I would imagine. But you have no choice.
Yeah.
And yet, really, this whole film is about choice. Like, to me, it's the choice I was trying to think of what was the moment. I'm all about the little things making a big difference and incremental change and so on. What was the moment that enabled either of these men to make the decisions they made in such a crazy situation?
Yeah.
So, and Zahed said, at one point, he says, I think this is the direct quote, by his photo, I decided to save his family. Yes,
exactly.
Like this, it's just, and bombs were probably dropping, and the smell of the gunfire. I mean, it's just, why that decision, Anne, and not another,
Exactly.
And that always kind of fascinates me, because there could have been another bunker just a kilometer away where a different decision was being made.
Yeah. I mean, I really like the way you put it. There's so many points in which just, their decision is what changed the course of both their lives. I mean, like you said, there are many things they couldn't decide. They had no agency about whether or not the war was going to happen.
Right.
They were conscripted. They had to go.
This is happening.
But then within those confines, the decisions that Zahed undertook in terms of risking his own life to save an enemy was a decision he made that had profound implications and really is such a inspiring story for all of us to kind of learn from. There are other moments too. I mean, when Zahed was depressed and suicidal in Vancouver, having arrived there as a refugee, his roommate said, "You should go to VAST, Vancouver Association for Survivors of Torture. They help people like you. You need to go talk to them." Zahed could have decided not to have gone there, but
exactly.
he agreed. He said he'd go, and
it's good.
Guess who's in the waiting room when he's there? So many. It was
well, and there's another thing your film is really about, isn't it? It's about serendipity. It's about those beautiful moments that. I was giving a eulogy, and I've done very few of those in my life at a friend's funeral recently, and tried to talk a little bit about that. That Lance will go on to remind me that we all need to pay attention and be present just a little bit longer. And I mean, isn't that kind of what this film is about too? It's this beautiful road memory about coming back home in a way, right?
Yeah, it's. I see them as the lost boys of the war, in the way that many young men's innocence is lost in war, or young men and women, and it was made more dramatic because they had to travel back to an area of the world that's still in conflict. That's been, Iraq has been a conflict zone for 3 decades.
Yes, yeah.
And what I think, I've always thought that Iraq in the Middle East has been an area of turmoil, but I did not realize until I started researching and doing this film that, until the early 80s, Basra, for instance, in Iraq, was considered the Venice of Middle East. It had palm trees and beaches. People flew there to take their vacations. It was a gorgeous place. And Basra and the rest of Iraq has been in ruins, and there's no infrastructure because of the ongoing conflict.
Well, there's a great moment, and clearly it was quite intentional on your part where I think Najah walks out. They're walking through the street. They're looking for sort of the area where he used to live, where he met his wife, and so on. And he says these roads used to be paved. It's just such a simple thing, from an infrastructural perspective, but huge implications.
Yeah.
So what? There's so many places we could go with this. So I really am kind of intrigued how you landed on this story. Was it an article? Was it a photo?
I know, eh? We get that photo. It's interesting whether that photo. I mean, if that's another point. If there wasn't a photo, would Zahed have stopped and saved this fellow?
Right.
I think he would have.
Right.
But that photo
you're probably right.
Just made it almost like impossible for him to proceed and kill this man once he saw that photo of, the loved ones that he had waiting for him. And I think that's something that Zahed and Najah have said also afterwards, is just, really stop and think about, who you think is your enemy, because in another context, they could be your friend. And,
right.
and the journey of their lives is just emblematic of that.
Well, I think that's a brilliant way to say it, and that's absolutely another subtext to the film to me is context. I mean, isn't context everything to some degree? And what does Najah say? He says right away he changed into a human.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So as if he wasn't human before.
No,
right?
He was the enemy.
He was the enemy. They were both demonizing one another.
Yeah.
And no, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think what's really quite lovely too and important about this film. I mean, it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful film. It's so well crafted, but you're helping, I think, to retell wrong way to put it, but tell in a new way this Middle Eastern narrative, especially in our context, and especially too today with so many Syrian newcomers coming to Canada, and there's such a deep potential, troubling potential for misunderstanding and for things being taken out of context and demonizing the other and so on. And I think that's what's there's another beautiful sort of takeaway for me.
I'm glad that you saw that, because we're in a world where Islamophobia has been rising in so many countries. is the President of America issues a travel ban on people traveling from certain Muslim majority countries. It's I laugh and also cry about the situation. But yes, this story helps you see like two Muslim men who are ordinary individuals who were in extraordinarily like horrific circumstances during the war, and yet they acted with such bravery,
right,
such fundamental decency and humanity that it just, if that doesn't make you stop and think about how you see others or who you think might be the enemy, then
well, okay. So is this crazy? Can we go here? So let's just sort of go really idealistic and crazy. What if this film had been shown at the White House?
I hope it does get shown at the White House.
Back in the 80s, right?
Oh, right.
Right, a film like this, because here you're showing these families. What did the government employees say to them? Something to the effect of, many others have lost their children and then found them. Heartbreaking on one level, but also kind of leveling the playing field. Yeah. Right? We're all in this together. This could happen to anyone. Look at the love these guys have for each other. This is not about some sort of Middle Eastern terrorist conflict that the Bush family is going to address. Right? These are real human beings, right? How would this have changed Donald Rumsfeld's Middle Eastern narrative, right?
Yes, for sure.
Is that too idealistic?
The former Bush,
yes,
and his son, the second Bush president, or Madeleine Albright and Colin Powell, or it's just all. America was involved in two Gulf wars and in the Kuwait War, and so not only was America involved, there was UK involvement and French involvement, and obviously Russia was involved as well. There's so much foreign interest in fomenting or keeping instability in the Middle East that I don't think, and I don't know how many of us realize that. And it would have been great if this was shown to the White House in the 80s. I wonder now, though, if it was shown to Trump, if it would do anything.
This is a really. Well, I would love to hear this from you. You're a poet, you're a writer, you've been directing film, storyteller. Are you making these movies to change the way people see the world, or are you making them to change the way a particular type of person sees the world? I'm not sure that's a clear question. What I'm trying to get at is, because I get frustrated. I love this kind of filmmaking. Show me more. I love to have conversations about it. Let's dig deeper. But are you preaching to the converted, do you think? Or do you think that this has the ability to break through?
I think that I'm always, first of all, I follow stories that move me first, or that I feel compelled to do for whatever reason. And part of that compulsion might be just a deeply personal thing, or another part of the compulsion might be about what I hear and sense around me, the views that people have, or what's being said, and how strongly do I feel about those views and such. And so there's a bit of both with this film. I think fundamentally it's just the characters and the people, Najah and Zahed, both are so compelling as individuals, and how they've behaved, how they've been with one another, that on a personal level, I was so drawn to them and their stories that, I stuck it out for 5 years. And
it's a serious
you don't
commitment.
always do that. It's got to be really a story that hits you strongly for you to stay with it that long. But in terms of, there is another project I'm working on where I'm hoping it will kind of duck in and under the radar with people and have them change their views. I think with a lot of the films I love to do have to do with something controversial, and to try and help people see things in a new light.
Sure.
And I am working on something about counterterrorism and intelligence, and I'm hoping that can help change the way people think about the war on terror, or
Well, and I think too,
terrorism.
isn't story too about the cumulative effect over time? So we see
Mhm.
this story, then we read something else, then we read another report that's maybe a little more,
Mhm.
I don't know, human centered, I suppose you could say,
Mhm.
rather than just, kind of, I don't know,
Mhm.
Western centric. Maybe
Yeah.
is that even a phrase? But
Mhm.
I guess my point is that over time, these parables, these stories, these ways of seeing do have an impact, or at least we gotta hope. We gotta hope, don't we?
Mhm. For sure. Yeah. I think for most of us, like we have such a lack of in the Western world of the images and sense of everyday life in countries like Iraq or Iran. That any more stories that will help you build and flesh out those pictures will help you see how they're just like you and we're
Right.
just like
Yeah.
them. And the geopolitical situation is unfortunate, and perhaps if enough of us are aware and keep demanding change, things will change for the better. Will help improve the situation of the lives of many of these people.
The opening of the film when Najah is talking about his family and looking for his wife and his daughter, or at least we get a sense that he's going to be looking for them. He says there's a line that just really knocked my socks off, and I think he said it in English. I can't remember now if it was the translation or not, but he said the invisible letters in the heart that
Mm,
connect.
yes,
And I just
yes.
went Persian poet, right? That's
Mm-hmm,
immediately where I went, but it was
mm-hmm,
just so beautiful, so romantic, so
mm-hmm,
heartbreaking in a sense. And
yeah.
at that point in the film, I didn't really know where we were going, or
Mm-hmm,
I hadn't really read a lot about it, so I didn't have any preconceived ideas. But it's
mm-hmm,
just so, I mean, again, a different story. This that
mm-hmm,
you're a different narrative, I guess.
mm-hmm,
This,
mm-hmm.
we're about to step into a whole new Middle Eastern context. It seems to me.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you found that. A lot of what he says is poetic,
It
and
really is.
yeah, it is. And I think that it also points to the richness of the cultures
Right.
that
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
the
It's
legacy
good.
for Zahed and Najah, the Iraqi and Iranian um, cultures, but also the common cultures that go back to thousands of years, upon which a lot of like English literature draws on as well. So
I
yeah,
thought.
there's a
I
lot of
thought.
moments of beauty.
I thought
Mm-hmm.
that you could have called. I don't know if you. I'm sure you will if you've worked with the project this long. You know your film, but I would have. I just kind of smiled. There was a phrase, and I think it was. Zahed that said it under the same roof, and without any guns.
Yes,
35,
exactly.
35 years later, here we are.
Yeah,
How could this have ever happened, basically? And
yeah,
talk about
yeah.
that whole, how important it is, the decisions we make, the choices we make. But I just thought it was beautiful, the phrase, under the same roof. Wow, that would have been a great name for the film, you know?
Actually, that would have been without any guns. Yeah, I
Because
know. I
aren't
mean,
we all under the same roof, for crying out loud?
yeah, wonderful point. He never expected to step foot again in
Yeah.
Iraq because the last time he was there, he was so traumatized, and it was war. And for him to go back with a passport and
Mm,
to be received
mm,
by these Iraqi men in uniform who just say, "Come on in,"
yeah,
is just
yeah.
astonishing. And it was there. That in itself was nerve-wracking for him because he went to help Najah, and every time he saw a soldier. In fact, one of the militias that we were in contact with, that we filmed with in their building, they had old uniforms that they were wearing. So the
Wow.
militia, it was a volunteer group of men banding together in southern Iraq in Basra to help fight against ISIS in the north,
Hmm.
up in Tikrit. And so a lot of these militias form in Basra, and it's like PTAs. They're just every other corner. These
Right.
men are offering to go and fight for their people, and it's
The
like
PTA going out to fight is kind of a funny image. Yeah.
yeah, it's just that regular. But it was this group happened to be using old uniforms that
Right.
were the old Saddam Hussein uniforms, and Zahed just had this incredible flashback. But then the soldier he was speaking to was just saying, we are friends, and that what happened between the regimes was the instigation of the leaders. It wasn't us. And it was just moving to see that. But it was also even, more moving for Zahed to be, received and hugged by Najah's sister, who had never, ever, hugged or shook hands with an Iranian.
Right.
And then for them to be on the battlefield together. They were at the border of Iran and Iraq. They went there, and it used to be a lush, verdant jungle with palm trees, and it was a barren desert, a wasteland because of that war.
Doesn't he say? I'm just seeing if I've got it in my notes here, but something along the lines of everything was destroyed, and then you cut to a shot that's a small town of some kind that's still there, but it's surrounded by desert, gone.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, everything was destroyed.
Well, to what was the? Yeah, right. Iraq is the country of the dead was the line.
Yeah. That again was Najah. It's the country of the dead. There's over 1 million people have gone missing because of 3 decades of conflict.
Well, and what? There's something there and too that, and I forget who it was, but you talked about the war after the war. And the implications of all this, the people that have gone missing, the families, the lives, the repercussions go on, the post-traumatic stress, the transgenerational trauma. I mean, what are some of the other things we need to be talking about and questions we need to be asking?
Why is that ongoing conflict in that area of the world? And, when is involvement justified? In what manner?
Right.
And when should there not be any involvement? And it's really complicated.
Well, this is where I get a little crazily, as my friends will tell you, and probably my podcast listeners, idealistic, and say, okay, let's get not just. I mean, the fingers pointing at me, pointing at everyone. It's about cross-contextual awareness. It's about cross-cultural awareness. It's about seeing ourselves and others, and similarity through difference. So I'm not pointing the finger necessarily at any current administration, but let's try to get some of those folks in the room and seeing these different narratives and saying, hang on a second, there is a different way to see the world. Now, how is that going to impact the decision that you're going to make? There is a war after the war, guys. Can we at least get that on the table and talk about that before we pull the trigger, for crying out loud?
For sure.
I don't know. Is that like, I just go, and I think a lot of us say, how hard can it be? Right?
Yeah.
And now we find ourselves in the middle of this North Korean mess. And where is that actually going to lead? Is this just all rhetoric and nonsense? But yeah, exactly. I love the way you end the film with father and son, and wandering around, and I hope I'm not tipping your hat or my hat. I'm not even sure if I'm using the phrase right. But Dad asks the son, "So what was good about your day?" And the little boy says, "Everything."
Yeah.
What a beautiful way to just sort of come full circle from, invisible letters in my heart. It's just, Anne, what a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for your time. It was, I hope we can do a part 2, maybe.
Yeah. Hopefully there'll be a reason for a part 2 for sure. I really enjoyed this, and thanks so much for having me on.
Well, we've been listening to a conversation with Anne Shin today. She's the director of My Enemy, My Brother. It is playing tonight, which is not going to be all that relevant for most of you listening at Hot Docs, but it is playing. Is there going to be a theatrical release? Do you know, Anne?
There'll be a theatrical release later in Canada, and we've also submitted to Vancouver International Festival.
Good
it's
for
also
you.
Playing Monday at 4 p.m.
Okay.
And Saturday at 6, next Saturday.
Excellent.
Also.
And you're doing a poetry reading, I believe, at the Aga Khan in May the 9th. Is that in Toronto?
May 14th.
May 14th. Yes. Is that in Toronto or in Ottawa?
It's in Toronto, and it's Writers for Rights. It's a reading with a bunch of other writers, headed up by Farzana Doctor.
Very cool. The film is My Enemy, My Brother, and you can find out more about it at myenemymybrothermovie.com. And thanks again for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a wonderful